In this episode, we'll design the page that lists all of the paparazzi for the current user. So let's see what that page could look like. We want to have a little header in that page with a title, a description, and a button to add a new paparazzi. Below that header, we will display one card per paparazzi. If you remember, a paparazzi is a resource that is going to take a screenshot at a given frequency. So when we display that paparazzi card, we will want to show the latest shot as an image and some of the most relevant information. So its title, its metadata, so let's say the amount of screenshots that have been taken within that paparazzi, and its frequency, so for example, every day at 10 p.m. Okay, so let's start to implement this. The first thing to do is for us to create a new route for that page. So we'll create a new route and call it paparazzi, and we will call the component for that page paparazzi index. Now we need to create that component, so let's copy this, go in our components directory, and create paparazzi index.view. Okay, so let's scaffold something real quick, and then visit that paparazzi page. Okay, so let's start with the header. We will start with a h1 tag that says my paparazzis, and a small paragraph that provides a description for that page. Now let's style these a bit better. So text gray 900, and let's make it Excel. And let's make that one a little bit lighter. Next, we'll add a button that will allow the user to create a new paparazzi. So base button, create new paparazzi. Okay, so let's group these two together and provide some margin bottom, so class MB8. Okay, so now let's make sure that this button sits on the right side of the header and the description. So we'll wrap this in a flex container. And we'll design that flex container so that when we don't have enough horizontal space, the button will sit below the title and the description, but when it does have enough space, it will sit on the right side. So by default, the flex direction will be column, so flex col, and when the screen is big enough, it will be flex row. The same goes with the item alignment. By default, we'll align them on the left, so item start. And when the screen is big enough, we will center them, so item centered. Next, we need to make sure that our title and our description take all of the space available. So we'll write flex 1. And the margin bottom of 8 is only applicable when the button is underneath the title. So we'll leave that by default, but when the screen is big enough, we will remove that margin bottom. Okay, so now if I save this, we can see that our header is ready. And if I reduce the size of our screen, the button goes underneath. And if I increase it, it goes back on the right side. Okay, so that is our header ready. Now let's give it a margin bottom of 8 and take care of those paparazzi cards here. So to create a grid effect with those paparazzi cards, we are going to use flex wrap. So we're going to create a flex container, which allow its element to wrap onto the next line. And to show you how this works, I'm going to create 8 divs inside that flex container using a v4. Now what I can do is provide a size for these cards based on the size of the screen. So by default, we'll make them full width, but as soon as the screen is reaching the small breakpoint, we'll display 2 within the same line, so they'll need to have a width of 50%. And finally, when the screen reaches the large breakpoint, we'll display 4, so they will take a quarter of the space available. Okay, so I'm going to display the number as a text so that we can see more clearly and save this. So as you can see at the moment, there are 2 cards per row, but if the screen is small enough, we only display 1, and if it's big enough, we display 4. Okay, next I'm going to simulate a paparazzi card by simply putting a panel inside these elements. So base panel, and that panel is going to display that number. Okay, so as you can see it works, but we need to work on the spacing a little bit. We'll give these elements a horizontal padding of 3, but because we want them to be aligned with the rest of the container, we will also remove some horizontal margin on that flex container. Finally, we will give these elements a margin bottom of 4, and when the screen is big enough, we'll increase that a little bit. Okay, so now we're ready to replace our mock base panels with our paparazzi cards. But in order to do that, we need to access some paparazzi data. We need to have an array of paparazzi, which pretends to be a typical response that would be returned by the server. So basically, we need a paparazzi stub. Just like we did the auth stub before, which was telling us whether the user was authenticated or not within our application, now we need to have a stub that is going to create some fake paparazzis for us. And because this is quite a big and boring task, I've already added a paparazzi stub to our application. So if I go to my stubs directory here, you can see we now have a paparazzis.js file, and that file is an array of objects. And each of these objects define one paparazzi. Now let's have a quick look at how these paparazzi objects are defined. So as you can see, it's simulating a unique identifier and defining properties like name, URL, a frequency, which is defined as a cron task, and also a frequency for human, which is what we'll be displaying in our UI. We've also got a list of shots, which are basically the screenshots that have been taken, and they repeat most of the properties that are defined in the paparazzi resource, except that they are immutable, which means that once the screenshot is taken, it captures the settings that the paparazzi had when the screenshot was taken. So if in the future, for example, we change the frequency of our paparazzi, that screenshot will still keep track of the original frequency that it was taken with. Okay, and last but not least, each of these screenshots have an image attribute, which references a static image in the public directory. And I've already added all of these images. So if you look at all of them, so P15, P14, etc., they are all available in the public directory under image stubs. And also at the end of each object, I've added 2 helper methods. One which is called latestshots, which simply returns the first shot of the list because they're ordered by date in descending order, and a shot count getter, which simply returns the length of this shots array. Okay, so now that we've mocked the data from our API by using a paparazzi stubs, let's use this in our paparazzi cards. So we'll go back to paparazzi index.view, and down here we will import paparazzis from stubs. Next, we can give that variable to our template by providing the data method. So data return paparazzi. Okay, so now this is available in our template, so we can remove those numbers and say v4 paparazzi in paparazzis, and the key will be paparazzi.id. And if I change number here with paparazzi.name, you can see that it has created a panel for each of our paparazzi. So now we're truly ready to design our paparazzi cards. We will replace that base panel with a paparazzi card component, and we'll give the paparazzi object as a props. So let's register that paparazzi component. And we'll create it inside our components directory. So instead of basing the design of our paparazzi card on the base panel component, we will do something a little bit more custom. And the reason for that is because I want those paparazzi cards to be closer to that create new paparazzi button. Because at the end of the day, they're not going to be a panel, but they're going to be a clickable element, which is going to take us to that paparazzi page that we will create further in this module. So let's create a div container with some classes that match that default button. Div, we'll make it white, rounded, give it a bit of shadow, and a bit of border that will be gray 400. And let's just write something for now. We'll accept the paparazzi as a props, and that will be an object. And now we can use this here, so we'll write paparazzi.name. Okay, so now let's add some hover classes. So when we hover on top of these cards, I want the shadow to be a little bit bigger, so shadow medium, and the border to be a little bit darker, as well as the background. We'll make it very, very slightly darker, so gray 100. And we'll make the cursor a pointer. Okay, so now when I hover on top of these cards, they feel a little bit more interactive. Next, inside each of these cards, we'll have two things. We'll have an image, which we will take care of in a minute, and we'll have some text. We won't give any padding for the image because we want it to touch all of the corners of the card, but we will give some padding to the text. So class padding of 4 everywhere. So in the text of these cards, we're going to display 3 things. The first thing is going to be some kind of hint or metadata, which displays the amount of shots, let's say 4 shots, and the time that the last shot was taken. So let's say 5 minutes ago. Underneath that metadata, we will display the name of that paparazzi. And underneath that name, we will display the frequency for humans. So that's available as paparazzi.frequency for humans. Okay, so before we design this text element, let's create a computed property that will display this metadata. So down here, we'll add a computed property, and we will call it metadata. So if the paparazzi has no shots, all we can display is 0 shots. So let's do that. If this.paparazzi.shot count equals 0, let's return 0 shots. However, if the paparazzi has some shots, then we will return the amount of shots that the paparazzi has. So this.paparazzi.shot count shots, and then we will display a little dot and write the second metadata, which is the time from now that the latest shot was created. So this is available as this.paparazzi.latestshot.created ago. And because shot count can be equals to 1, we need to make sure we don't display the S in this case. Okay, so now that our metadata computed property is ready, we can use it here. So vText equals metadata, and we can remove that metadata. Okay, so now you can see that the metadata is taken from our paparazzi stubs, and when no shots exist, it will simply display no shots. Okay, so now let's give these texts a different hierarchy by styling them a little bit differently. For the metadata, we'll make it smaller, a little bit bolder, and we'll make it uppercase. For the name of the paparazzi, we'll give it some vertical margin and we will make it darker, bolder and bigger. Finally, for the frequency, we'll make it a little bit smaller and a little bit lighter. Okay, so now we can move on to the image of our paparazzi cards. For each of these cards, we're going to display the latest shot that was taken by the paparazzi. That means if the paparazzi hasn't got any shots yet, we need to display some kind of generic image to keep our paparazzi cards aligned. So let's separate those two use cases. We'll create a div if the paparazzi has some screenshots, and a div if it doesn't. If it has got some shots, then we will be displaying the image of the latest shot using the background image CSS property. And we will give that image a fixed height of 48. We will make sure it is covered, aligned to the top, and that it has a border button. Okay, so that works, but as you can see, the corner of the image overflows its container. So we need to add here overflow hidden. Okay, that's better. Next, we need to take care of the case where no shots has been taken yet. So it's fine in this situation, but if we increase the size of the screen, then you can see that there is a discrepancy in the alignment of the cards. So we need to display some placeholder image in here. To find these types of images, I like to go to undraw.co and then search for some illustrations here. So let's say photo, and find some really nice empty states for photographs. So let's say this one. So I've already downloaded and added this to our projects and made sure that the color matches the blue of our logo. So if I go back to our application, in the public directory, you can see an empty photo.svg, and this is what I've downloaded from the Undraw website. Okay, so let's use this. Inside that VLs container, I'm going to add an image, and it's going to point to that image/empty-photo.svg. And because it's an SVG, let's give it a fixed width of 32. Okay, so let's see what we have here. Okay, that's not bad, but ideally the image would be centered in the middle of the card, and the height of the image would match the height that we have for the other cards. So let's fix that. We'll make this div a flex container that aligns its element vertically and horizontally. We'll give it a height of 48 and a border bottom to match the other cards. And we'll also give it a light gray background to distinguish the image part and the text part a bit better. So now if I save this, that's much better. And if we increase the size of our screen, then all of our cards, whether they have shots or not, have the same height. Okay, so that's our paparazzi index page done. In the next few episodes, we will concentrate on the paparazzi show page. And within this page, the user will be able to manage all aspects of the paparazzi.